This video, like many on my channel, brought to you by What Delicious Energy Formula. That's right, I'm speaking quicker. Maybe I had my game subs earlier. Lemonade, that's one of my favourite flavours. Tastes just like what you'd imagine. Grandma's old lemonade. Not necessarily your grandma. Asterisk, depending on if you have a grandma and if she ever made lemonade. But if you imagine what a grandma might make lemonade like, it's quite tasty. And sugar-free, unlike grandma's lemonade, depending on your grandma. But most of them did put sugar in. That was one of the secrets, wasn't it? Game subs taste delicious anyway. Well balanced out. No sugar. Keto friendly, has a really nice long build up and nice plateau, nice taper off at the end. You don't get the hard crash. How do you get it, you ask? Well, get 10% off using the code Thorin at gamersubs.gg. I'm going to do a tier list here on my side channel where I won't go into the whole preamble I just said on my stream, but basically I'm going to start doing tier lists where I obviously like to do ones where I've seen everything in someone's film's career or I've heard all the albums, etc. I'm going to do some that are incomplete if it's like an Alan Moore one or like a Hodorowski or something for comics, because if I've read 90% of it, then that's actually pretty good and I could already do a tier list. So for this one, I thought I'd start with the Christopher Nolan tier list because one, he's my favourite director. Two, he has been for like 15 years now or something. And also, I've seen every single one of his films. If you don't know, there are 12 Christopher Nolan directed films. They are, this isn't in order, they're just put, there's Interstellar, there's Insomnia, there's Following, which we're certainly going to talk about because you probably haven't seen it. And by the way, if you're a Christopher Nolan fan, you should probably even stop this video and immediately go and see it. There's Tenet, the maligned Tenet. There's The Prestige, the criminally underrated one. Oppenheimer, who everyone went crazy about last year. Inception, surely everyone knows that. The Dark Knight. Dunkirk, a lot of people weren't really fans of that one. Memento, probably the most criminally underrated one aside from The Prestige. The Dark Knight Rises, third of the trilogy. And then the first of that trilogy was obviously Batman Begins, wasn't it? So we're going to do the ranking here. And I will say, sometimes when I do my tier lists, it's funny because in esports, I'm super harsh with S tier. But when I did my NBA one, which is still forthcoming, that one I just realised I did put way too many names in S because I did put the greatest basketballs of all time. But then I needed to really separate those. You really need like an S plus then, don't you? For Michael Jordan and Kobe and so to go over Charles Barkley. But anyway, we'll get to that is the point. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually just going to do them in order of when they came out. So if we go all the way down here, the first one he did in 1998 was the movie Following. Now, the first movie I saw of Christopher Nolan's, because I'm just old compared to you, I'm actually the prime of my life, was Memento, which I already saw and I was like, this is mega. Now, I then saw them all in order, in fact, on the cinema as they came out. But once I got super into film, I think around this time period when I knew he was cooking, I went back, as I would hope you all will, and I watched his first proper film, Following. Now, you're going to think, because it's like a British film or whatever, and it's not like... Here's the thing. On the one hand, look, it's not like super insane, but the writing is really good. Even the style of how he shoots it and shows things out of sync, Tarantino-esque, actually really works for the plot. And if you know the film Memento, you can almost see things he was experimenting with there, where it changes the context of what you then think of a character or what they do later on when you find a different piece of information before or afterwards. And it's got, as usual, I won't say like a twist, but it's got like twists and turns, and it's got like, I won't say satisfying, but it's got some I think it's quite well brought together, which is another thing I really enjoy about Christopher Nolan films. You can see why he's my favourite director, in the same way as Alan Moore's my favourite comic book writer. They have a sort of structural overview that is very impressive, and how they keep the pieces in order and know where they want to go with it. And then it seems at the end they always weave it into something where something emerges greater out of the whole story and the way they told the story and the performances with it. Also, he is an excellent director in terms of the casting of his films. Somehow he just picks people that even if you don't fuck with that actor, you don't think it's a great actor, they just really fit that role. Like in this particular one, the character who plays, let's just say, we'll just call him a thief in this particular film. The charisma this guy has, considering he's an actor, I don't even know that I particularly have ever seen anything else. He's not a famous actor, just really nails it. So if you've never seen this Christopher Nolan film, you are in for a treat. I'd go away immediately and watch this one. I won't tell you anything in terms of spoilers about how it goes. And you know what's funny? I think it's an independently made film. I'm going to immediately put that B tier. So you already know we're cooking. Spoiler, I don't even know if anything's going to be C tier on this one. I'm not going to put everything S tier though. And I'll try at the end to shuffle them around to potentially even use all the tiers. Because what I'm going to do is this. This isn't Christopher Nolan films relative to all other films. This is Christopher Nolan's films tier list. So there could be a C and a D at the end, the worst ones of his films. I will also say, because we're going to go in order, certain films I will definitely put S. So if we then go next after that, following, I told you, it even has, by the way, it's one of those classic things about a director, which is great directors are thinking about and working on certain ideas and themes and philosophies pretty much throughout their oeuvre, their body of work, as it were. So you'll see already in that film, the sort of like initial seeds and sort of the threads starting to emerge of what Christopher Nolan's going to try and talk about and express in his films, what he finds fascinating about human nature and storytelling, and even, as I say, camera tricks and sort of how you structure a plot, because obviously he likes non-linear plots sometimes. Obviously it went to its extreme with Tenet, didn't it? So then I'm going to go to Memento. Now, I've got to say I have a lot of affection for this film. First of all, it's funny that apparently Guy Pearce doesn't think he did a very good job. This is one of Guy Pearce's best films. I think Guy Pearce is an actor who can be in very good films. His main problem is he doesn't seem to have the greatest eye for selecting films. And he's been in a lot of sort of mid or like 6 or 7 out of 10 films where he was pretty good. Or the problem is he's often, believe it or not, cast as a villain. So sometimes he just doesn't get the central billing. But I do think he is a good actor. I do enjoy him. So I've got to say, Memento immediately feels like it goes to A tier. Because if you've ever seen it, it doesn't, unlike a lot of other Christopher Nolan, it doesn't have like a particular like sci-fi tech element to it. I won't spoil it. It's basically about someone who has a particular reason why he has to consider what has happened to him in the past and is going to happen. But let's just say without, as you or I would, the ability to just remember or project forwards. Again, I don't want to spoil the central plot and the mechanism of the film, but the genius of the film, and this is a thing that Christopher Nolan likes to do in general, is whatever the core idea or theme of a Christopher Nolan film is, he will actually mirror it, because he's thinking about this idea, in how he actually directs and structures the film, which is one of the most genius things. So essentially in this film, what I've just said about the character has to like not necessarily know what came before or is coming after, figure out like in the moment what they could do to like speculate what could have happened in the past and guess what might happen in the future, and then get to the next place they need to be in the story. But then overall, as a big overview for the film by the end, maybe we see it very differently from them. That's how he actually structures the film. It's got a lot of clever storytelling. The actual human element is like somewhat interesting. Carrie-Anne Moss does a good job. The other guy, I forget his name, Joe Pantaglione or whatever. By the way, 2 of the people from The Matrix are in this, Cypher and Trinity. They both do a good job. Some of the other ones are just kind of whatever. It's not a particularly big cast film, by the way. Neither was Following. But it really just shows off what Christopher Nolan's capable of. And if none of these other films existed, it could go S tier, but there's films that are better by him. So we're going to put it A tier. Very much a recommended film. This is more for people who are nerds about Christopher Nolan and who just like, you know, quirky, unusual independent films you haven't seen, like that famous film Primer you might have heard of. If you have never seen that one, probably one of the best independent sci-fi films ever. I think it was made on a budget of $4,000. This one here is an 8 out of 10 or something. This is a 7.5 out of 10 or something. It's a very legit film with nice performances. And I think, I will say it's a darker Christopher Nolan film, but I think it really delivers. And it's very much like, it's got puzzle elements to it, but it's beautifully, this is some clockwork-esque machinery of how he does it. He's very much one of those guys where you could believe he's a deist, couldn't you? Because, first of all, he's like a techno-futurist, if we're being real, and probably a transhumanist, quite frankly, if you think even in some of the films he produced recently. But I would say he's clearly someone who has that notion of like, things are all in order and flow into each other and work in a systematic way. So yeah, definitely an A for that. Then we are going to go to Insomnia. Now, crucially, this is a key detail to make the point of. Insomnia is a film where the central role is played by Al Pacino, who does a very good job. It's funny, Al Pacino in the last 10 years is really old in films. This is just when he was old in a cool way. Same way as at this point in time, Robert De Niro was only just falling off that kind of a role. So he's kind of that, he can play the older cop, which he is in this film, or the like haggard guy, or the guy who's like, he's still got like the heart, but he's been through the ups and downs of a career and a marriage and all these things. But the thing is, it's mainly the performances that carry this one. The plot itself, I think, is good, but I don't think it's incredible. And some of the attempts, some of the twists I thought were a bit like, yeah, it's all right. Like, look, it's a good film. I enjoy it. If Christopher Nolan hadn't directed it, would I enjoy it as much? Probably not. It'd probably be more like a 6.5 or a 7 out of 10 for me, which is actually a 7.2 out of 10 here. Fair enough. Crucially, it is a remake of a film that was, I think, a Norwegian film that had like Stellan Skarsgård in or something. Never seen that one, actually. Probably should watch it sometime. So I think Insomnia I'm going to put for B initially. It is a good film, but again, it's not. Put it this way, if I didn't tell you it was Christopher Nolan, I don't actually know if you'd guess. To me, this was, if you think about how Hollywood works, what's happened here is he's like shown his chops in the UK with this film. He's got his chance to work with Hollywood actors and done like a banger sort of like mystery type film with clever storytelling techniques. Then what he's tried to do, I would guess, because you have to build your career, is he's tried to show Hollywood, I can just make you a real proper Hollywood film with Al Pacino and Robin Williams. Robin Williams does a fairly good job in this, but he's also, the problem is Robin Williams' career, because it started out as a comedy guy, he then tried to do the transition, which he succeeded in, which I would say actually Jim Carrey didn't quite succeed in, which is he wanted to become a serious actor. Now, the obvious juxtaposition you do if you want to be a serious actor in that sense is you play quite dark characters or villains even. So I would say he does a good job in this one, but he also did quite a lot of films in that vein over the latter sort of like 10, 20 years of his career. So it kind of became a thing. So I think it goes there. Then it's obviously going to be Batman Begins. Now that already shows you that before he gets to the really insane films, Christopher Nolan's establishing something in Hollywood and getting bigger budgets. So what he's showing here is, this is in 2005, remember? That's before the Marvel movies. Like, when did didn't Iron Man come out in like 2000? Yeah, Iron Man's the first Marvel one, like the proper modern one. That's 2008. So this is actually, for its era, a pretty good film, and particularly a pretty good DC film. But I will say, at the time, cape and superhero movies weren't dominating all the charts. Like, they'd had the X-Men films from, I think it was Fox, wasn't it? Those were pretty good. Or was it Warner Brothers? I don't know, one or the other. I have a weird soft spot for those two Fantastic Four movies because I think they're very well cast. And there's kind of popcorn movies. If you don't know, the Human Torch is actually played by Chris Evans, who was obviously in Marvel, then later on Captain America, isn't he? But I obviously wasn't a big fan of some of the Marvel ones. I just thought they were like decently done popcorn movies. So for me, Batman Begins, it's funny, I revisited this recently and it is better than I remember at the time. At the time I saw it, I hadn't gotten super hyped on this director. I've seen these films. I've seen Memento and Insomnia, but I don't really get about the director. I'm just watching films on the cinema. I remember watching Batman Begins and going, that's good, but I also think you've gone almost too much into the realism. Like, without doing any spoilers, you sort of half give fan service to Ra's al Ghul, and then half of it wasn't because you were almost trying to, like, Christopher Nolan things are a sort of like Alan Moore's early work, like dragging fictional things into the real world, which to me isn't the point of superheroes. And it would be like making a film about Hercules, and that's like, but of course he wasn't really like a demigod. It's like, well, then why do a Hercules film? He was just a really strong guy who sort of like, was willing to like, like an Iron Man or something. He was willing to just go on through endurance. It's like, well, you're sort of taking the magic of Hercules away there. So I did think a little bit of where they tried to make it realistic was a little bit flawed. I think that even continued on into that recent The Batman, the one with Robert Pattinson, which was good, but this is probably slightly better. It is a good film. It's the worst of the trilogy, but it's actually a better film than I remember. It's definitely not an 8 out of 8.2. I don't even know what fucking universe. I mean, let's face it, they all just started worshipping Christopher Nolan, didn't they? I think he's an extremely good director, but it doesn't mean everything he did was an 8. So that's crazy. This is more like a solid 7 out of 10. Depending on if I'm feeling generous, I could give it a 7.5. So I think for that one, I'm going to put it there for the moment, and I'll consider moving it to there. I'll consider it. But I do think Memento is a clearly better film for me and a more enjoyable experience. One thing I'll give credit to Batman Begins, though, even though I didn't like Katie Holmes' casting, this is another theme that emerges from Christopher Nolan. He's just really good, whoever it is who does the casting for him, at casting people in roles where if they're not a very good actress or actor, they're just not ruining the film. Like, Katie Holmes is all right. Look, I even think Maggie Gyllenhaal can be a good actress. She's a worse casting for that role in terms of what she looks like. But I guess she's a better actress, but I don't know that she really got to show her acting chops off much in the other films. I just thought Katie Holmes was annoying in this film. That's the problem. But she's much worse in Dawson's Creek or whatever the fuck I saw her in 20 years before that. Well, probably 10 years at this point in time. So I think I'll say generally, like, listen, Liam Neeson's the shit, innit? I forget even the name of that actor that played, the Asian actor that played Ra's al Ghul. He's pretty fire too. It's good. It's good. It is a good film. We'll put it there for the moment. Then obviously comes The Prestige. Spoiler. I always say, if you can only pick one film as your favourite film, The Prestige is my favourite film. If I can pick two, then I pick my original favourite before I saw The Prestige, which is Heat from 1995, and then I pick The Prestige. Those are the two best films ever made, in my opinion, and my favourites. And I am someone who can have a favourite without it being the best ever. I also think those are just masterworks of direction, acting, performances, pacing, storytelling, plotting, fucking script writing, or special effects. They're just fucking unbelievable films, aren't they? So spoiler, Prestige goes instantly into S tier. It is fucking unbelievable, this film. First of all, Hugh Jackman, I'm not someone who goes crazy. Like, I liked him in the X-Men films. Obviously, then he kept just doing Wolverine movies that weren't particularly good after that. And actually, that's gotten a bit hackneyed, even though he is good at the role. I mean, by the way, the reason you know Hugh Jackman's a good actor and you like him, he's very amiable, is you do realise he's really tall and Wolverine's like a fucking midget or short ass in fucking the comics. Not midget, he's just short. It's like totally different build, but you just don't care. In this film, this is another masterpiece of casting. If you don't know, forget Alfred in these ones. Michael Caine in this film is fucking unbelievably cast. He is that perfect old wise guy who's sort of got some moral teachings for you and some wisdom. It can guide you a little bit, but he is an old feeble guy, so he can't do too much himself. Hugh Jackman is excellent as the kind of, again, I won't give any spoilers away. This is a film that has, you can't tell anyone anything going into this film. It's about magicians who are battling. I'll just tell you that alone. He is really good at playing sort of the righteous indignation, the baby face, basically, the protagonist of the film, you will think. And then Christian Bale, who obviously was in Batman here. By the way, Christian Bale, fabulous actor. I actually don't think was particularly insane in Batman Begins. In the Batman films, he's not actually one of the better parts for me. He's just good. He's just good. They're not his best performances. I actually think Christian Bale is excellent in this film. This is one of the best. This might be the best performance of his whole career. It is really fucking excellent what he does because it's such a nuanced performance. And then when you find out what happens to his character as the film goes on, you will realise that the nuance wasn't him just like not emoting a lot in certain scenes. That's actually something that you will later realise, and this is a very clever thing about the film, is the genius that you will rethink how you see that scene, and you will realise that there was nuance there, not a lack of like overreaction, big bombastic reaction. There's times where he's certainly full on, where he's charismatic. There's times where he's a bit more reserved, a bit quiet, a bit more muted. And they contrast really, really well. The whole protagonist-antagonist angle is really well done, and let's just say the dynamic there is a little bit fluid, and that itself becomes a very exciting component of the film. And crucially, as I said about Memento, by the way, even about Batman Begins, it was about like making yourself into more than just like the idea of a hero. What does it mean to become the Cape Crusader? That sort of shit. Well, in the same way, oh, by the way, this film Insomnia is also about like morality and like who is guilty and who can be forgiven and can we overlook certain things and should certain people pay the price even if it has a cost to you, attritionally, etc. This film's about things like theft, privacy. What does it mean to invade someone's space or to have your space invaded? Again, the way that he does the film is mirroring or paralleling and resonating with elements of how he then told the story and what the story was. That's the genius of Christopher Nolan. They're like films that are almost, what would you say? They work on different planes of thinking. So I would say The Prestige also, since it's about magicians, the whole film is also about how a magician tells you a story, how he shows you something, but maybe that means something else later, or he shows you something so as not to show you something else, or he doesn't show you something to make you think something else. And the actual way the film is put together, this is the genius of it, because you have to watch it to know what I mean. This isn't a spoiler. The way the film itself, the story is told, is actually intentionally told that way. They don't lie to you. They just show you with certain shots. It is intentionally told so that the film itself eventually mirrors I won't explain why because I don't even want to give the terms away. It eventually mirrors the actual process of how one of these stage magician's tricks is done. And that is why I remember seeing this film on the cinema and just coming out like, that might be the best film I've ever seen in my life. Remember, this came out in 2006. So by that time, I am already 23 years old, I think. Yes, 23 years old. I remember thinking this is the best film I've ever seen. This is unfucking believable. And I knew in that moment, right, I've got to get on this Christopher Nolan guy. Everything this guy is going to do is going to be at least worth a watch. Like every director, not every movie's fire, but when they're as good as this guy is, I always say it, for this sort of artist, give me the lifetime pass. I'm in on the ride. I'll take the ticket and take the ride no matter what film you make. No matter what people are saying online. I hate half the shit that goes on my Discord of people in the art channel. They haven't seen a film yet. They're just getting every little leaked screenshot and detail and going, oh, this is going to be shit. Oh, of course, that'll be bloody trash. Can you believe this? Oh, my God, is he doing that? It's like, oh, what a bunch of gossiping bitches you are. Jesus. This is a great artist. You're not even going to give him a chance to actually make the film and watch it. I like to go into films that people like this guy make with no information and just experience it for fuck's sake. And if, like you'll find with Tenet, I watch it and I'm like, I don't totally vibe parts of that or what was going on. I trust that he's doing something that might be more advanced than what I initially experienced. And I'll revisit it and give it another chance or two. And spoiler, Tenet is one that actually blossoms. After you see it once, well, I'll get to that. It just gets better and better and better each time. So easy S tier immediately. I think it's the best film ever made. By the way, speaking of casting, Scarlett Johansson is another actor. She's an actress who actually sort of in that Guy Pearce category. She can be pretty good if you put her in a good film or an indie film or a great director film or with a nice script and a character. She could also just be mid as fuck in terms of her acting in like superhero movies, just generic Hollywood, I don't know, rom-coms, silly movies. Like, I can take her or leave her in that sense. She is almost perfectly cast in this film. It's really well done. Then we will go to, it's going to be the superheroes again, The Dark Knight. Now, this has a 9.0 out of 10. This is where everyone else hopped on Christopher Nolan, but I actually was like, this is going to get annoying now, innit? Because you know how Led Zeppelin's one of the greatest bands of all time. They're probably top 5 of all time for me. If someone tells me every single song they ever did and every member of the group was the absolute best ever, then it's like, no, now you've gone too far. Now you've even managed to overrate Led Zeppelin. Same with Tool. Same with fucking loads of all-time great groups and bands. Same with Aphex Twin. People don't just support or like these people. They just say everything they did was the best. They're just whacking it. So The Dark Knight, my problem is this. This film, if I did a Thorin's director's cut, I will radically change the plot because I will leave a lot of the third act of this film out. And I would make this film immediately a 9 out of 10. Because the central performance by Heath Ledger, which itself then got overrated because he died, is very good. It's not the best performance on camera and all that. Calm down. It is extremely good though. And I also think that, what's his name? Aaron Eckhart is very good as well. It's just, again, my edit would be, I wouldn't have him do that third part. I'd just have him be who he is in the first 2/3. Christopher Nolan's good. This was obviously written also by his brother, who I think wrote The Prestige as well. Now, crucially for me, this film goes into A for now. Because I do think the third act, the third part of the film, has like structural issues. I think it even almost extends the point about certain philosophical quandaries. It's almost trying to do trolley experiments and stuff. Some of that I don't think lands. I think essentially most of the Joker storyline is fucking mega. The action scenes are unbelievable. The one where he goes on the bike is super, super sick. Also, some of the things that they're trying to say, here's an element about Christopher Nolan you might not understand. You know, I just said earlier, he's sort of a techno-futurist or a transhumanist. You're going to go, what do you mean? He's just a sci-fi director. No. First of all, I'll just get, you know what, I'll drop a few based hints here. Go and look up early in his career, before he was doing a lot of these films, like a name that he used to have as part of his name that he later dropped from his name. He wasn't just called Christopher Nolan when it was written on like certain scripts and documents. I think he was like shooting as a cameraman for someone. Just go and look up what the name he dropped was. That'll give you a hint that he might be connected to a world that we have no part of and can't really know what's going on there. Also, when you're funded as heavily as he is, you're not just some visionary director. Spoiler, I'll probably do a video one day about Stanley Kubrick. If you ever saw on this channel an interview I did with Jason Horsley, who wrote a book about Stanley Kubrick, I do think that Stanley Kubrick's films essentially are a genius way of encapsulating within art the psyops of those decades. And he actually, you might not know this, shaped not just yours, but public consciousness about certain psyops in science, politics, society, because you saw his films. Remember, when we watched the film, the human mind, because we like the film, we suspend disbelief when we go into the film. It takes place in our imagination and on the screen. So that actually changed it. We feel like we experienced real characters undergoing real experiences and learned and gleaned real information and lessons and life lessons that we didn't. It was a film written by someone and the characters are fake, acted by people, and they actually had, like, it doesn't even have to bear any sort of correspondence to reality, but we feel like we experienced something. That is one of the key things. So one of the things I will say about this film, if you don't get it, is this film quite clearly contains an undertone. It's also something that, Logo Daedalus is very good at sort of breaking down films like this. It's a film that contains undertones that are essentially asking the question, because it was during the global war on terror that America and the UK and the others were fighting, of, is it okay to use essentially like Orwellian technology that invades all of our privacy? If, think about this, now spoiler, just skip forwards if you don't want to hear this spoiler for the film. If at the end of it, only the good guys use it, and then at the end, they get rid of it and agree to destroy it, never to be made again. What? And there's sort of a China undercurrent, so that doesn't make the film worse, but I'll just say, I actually think that, if you understand sort of the illusions it's going to, it's sort of interesting, but it's also a bit 24-ish of like, well, yeah, the ends justify the means to you. I'm someone, if you don't know, who philosophically is diametrically opposed to the idea the ends justify the means. They never justify the means. They never justify the means. Like, as in, if someone was going to kill my family, I would become a monster to stop them, but I would also understand that I'd then become a monster. And in that scenario, if I was in Minecraft, I might have to destroy myself. In that sense, I guess me and Alan Moore and V for Vendetta sort of agree with each other. It's where you have to, the amount of lore I'm dropping here, you have to just read all and watch all the shit I've watched, right? But it is a really good film. And obviously the Joker storyline's fucking mega. And sadly, I'll just tell you, spoiler again, if you don't know, the reason why the film's sort of a bit scuffed at the end is because Heath Ledger died. If you don't know, it was implied that what they were actually doing was the reason they burned the other character at the end and wasted it all. And you're like, what the fuck, it should have been its own film. It's because they thought actually that the Joker would then be in the sequel and they'd use him again. And then they obviously couldn't do that and they had to turn it around, didn't they? After that, we are then obviously going to be going to Inception. By the way, that's definitely not a 9 out of 10. Like, let's be real. I'll try rating these films. So following, what did I say? It was 6.5, 7 out of 10. Insomnia, probably a 7 out of 10. Batman Begins, maybe I could give it a 7.5. Memento, that's an 8 out of 10. Dark Knight, probably an 8 out of 10. By the way, for me, I don't fuck around. I use the old PC and Amiga magazine scores from the 90s. I mean actually like 80% or 7. I don't mean everything good 7 out of 10. No. Average is 5. Like somewhat good 6 to 7. Very good 7.5. 8 is excellent. 9, you're almost never hitting. There is no 10 out of 10 film. The Prestige, fuck it, I'll give it a 9.5. I don't think any film could have a 10 unless I made it and I went full Kubrick on it. That's just the way that art works and subjective nature. Then we're going to go to Inception. Inception's the one where, look, I remember after The Dark Knight being like, everyone else is telling me it's a 10, but it's not. Fuck, is he going to keep making? Because obviously I'd seen this, and at the time I thought this was almost like a 6 out of 10. I kept thinking, fuck, everyone's telling me these are the best ones. And then everyone, by the way, it's actually insane how many people have seen Christopher Nolan films, say he should win the Oscar. They love Oppenheimer. They loved fucking The Dark Knight. Dark Knight Rises, genius. They like Memento. The amount of people who haven't seen The Prestige is actually criminal. And don't look up the Rotten Tomatoes score. It'll make you fucking sick. It's the most criminally underrated film maybe ever, relative to the fact I think it's the best film. For Inception, doesn't everyone just know this is good? This is the sweet spot where he makes a brilliant film, including sci-fi elements and amazing shots and a really good ensemble cast. And it's the sweet spot. It's where everyone likes it. It's just a film everyone enjoys, isn't it? Isn't it like Gladiator? Everyone just likes it. So I have to say, this goes into S tier. Now, I do think this film has its own, unlike The Prestige, which I think is brilliant from beginning to end. It's like the comic Watchmen. It's just fabulous. I almost don't even know what I'd change about it. I do think Inception has one flaw. Spoiler. It's not really a spoiler, actually. It's just towards the end. Let's just say when they go to the final state, I thought that part, I could see what they were trying to do in terms of art, but that was almost more like a Michel Gondry film or something. I thought that's where it kind of lost itself a bit. I thought it should have just gone to a different type of a level. And I did think that the way... Here's the sad thing. I actually have a video on my channel, if you don't know, about Inception and some of my thoughts on it, where I actually explain, when I watched this film, an alternate ending I thought he was building up and planting the seeds to that doesn't happen. So I will say, I actually think it's the most misunderstood ending ever, because what the general consensus is, or people doing stupid things like asking Christopher Nolan, I don't care what Christopher Nolan says. I care what I take from the film. So I believe in that death of the author. So I actually think the ending, to me, infers something quite different to what most people actually seem to take from that film. And if you really think that you can see by the shot he does whether it falls or not, me and you could never even talk about films. We're seeing them on a completely different level, I'm afraid. We're just seeing them on a completely different level. Spoiler, I'll just make the obvious joke towards you. You're going like, but did it fall? Not. You do know in real life that actually couldn't spin forever. So I'll just put that out there. As in, think about it. He intentionally misled you with that so you could think either way and it was open to interpretation. And then I think it's based on what you think about other parts of the movie, like I mentioned in my video on my side channel, which you're on right now. Inception, easily up there. I would say, what's Inception as a film? It's easily an 8 out of 10. It might even be a 9 out of 10, because I've got to say the first 3 quarters are just fabulous. It's one of the best Leonardo DiCaprio roles. I think he actually does a very good job in terms of character acting, in terms of Tom Hardy, even though he's not in it much. Who else? I'm not even a big Joseph Gordon-Levitt fan. I think he's a good actor. I think it's one of his better films. Cillian Murphy's good in it. It's not one of his best roles. Cillian Murphy's also criminally underused in Batman Begins, by the way. He probably should have been his own villain in his own film. For some reason in these films, the Dark Knight movie, he kept just putting too many characters in. He didn't really let them breathe in that sense. What else about Inception? And also, this is one of the films you have to get like a home projector or something. You've got to see this on like a big screen. It's really, really, some of the shots are fucking incredible. And I do think, look, to be fair, yes, he did clearly take some inspiration and certain even scenes and shots from the Satoshi Kon anime Paprika, which is also an excellent film, but a very different type of a film, much more an anime film with Japanese sort of like horror elements in it. And it's an anime, so it's more about like animation, obviously, in that film. He's doing like a film version of some aspects of that, but it's not like he cribs too much from it. The central plot is very interesting. Philosophically, obviously, it's about the idea of like, can you get lost in a dream? What is a dream? Are our dreams like waking life? Is waking life itself a dream? What would happen if we could influence dreams? How could our subconscious work against us in dreams? There's a lot of interesting things going on here, especially because when I first saw this, I was a rational materialist. So I was thinking about it from like a programming the mind level. Now, obviously, I'm more on the Alan Moore side of like the imagination is either a portal to the collective unconscious or another world, or there's a level of irreality that can't be real as a result, but you can access it and potentially maybe even it has a consensual or continuous nature between people, and even without you anymore participating in it, if you've had certain ideas. I think that works for songwriters. I kind of do think that they kind of almost fish in a river and catch songs that they could have caught from each other. There's even a joke like that. I'll probably do a side channel video about that one day. Supposedly, Michael Jackson, when he was at the peak of his rivalry with Prince, used to just rush to the studio and record any song that came in his head so that like Prince couldn't get the transmission and the frequency of that song and record that song instead. Which is just hilarious, but all right. That's such a banger, isn't it? I'll probably do a video on that, but it'll be about how Noel Gallagher writes songs and copies or steals from people. There'll be an interesting one coming on that one. Then we are going to have Dark Knight Rises. Now, Dark Knight Rises is almost the same experience I had with The Dark Knight. Because I remember watching it and going, holy fuck, the main bad guy is straight fire. He is incredible. But then the last third act of the film is sort of not so much about him and is about another bad guy. That's not really that interesting a one. And also, why don't these bad guys get all their own films? So again, I think the third act's somewhat weak. Like, what's sad about this film is I'm probably going to put it straight into A. I don't think any of the Batman films get to S for me. And the reason I'm putting it into A is because I do think that the plot is pretty good. I think the first third of the film is fucking unbelievable. Like, all the shit with Bane in the first third is absolutely fantastic. The way they present, what they let you think that character is fucking dope. That's one of the best real world uses of like a fictional character I've ever seen. It's really, really fucking dope. And Tom Hardy kills it. If you don't know, it's so cleverly shot. You will think Tom Hardy is enormous. Tom Hardy is quite small compared to Christian Bale, if you don't know. Go look it up. Christian Bale's massive, by the way. I think Tom Hardy even said he was intimidated by him on the set. You'd never believe that from the film. And it's true. Here's a detail a lot of people don't know about this film. I saw it on the cinema, and on the cinema, initially, it actually was way harder to understand what Tom Hardy was saying. And by the way, I have an English accent. Because the initial vocal mix was really scoffed on this film. I think Christopher Nolan did that thing where he wanted it to be kind of a bit obscured what he was saying. And there's a classic problem I've noticed when people edit things, as in a musician, a film editor, because they've seen the clip 1,000 times. Think of Francis Ford Coppola's The Conversation. If you've never seen that film, that would help you understand this. Or Michael Antonio's Blow Up, or the fucking, what's it called? De Palma Blowout. These, when you listen to or watch a piece of film over and over and over and over again, or listen to it over and over and over and over again, you've got it so imprinted on your mind what it is you're working with, the base material, that you can do things like edit it too quickly. So you've seen it a million times. So when you watch it, you see all the things you want to see. But the person seeing it the first time, I didn't quite catch all that. Same with listening to something. You might think, I can pick out what he's saying there. But you also maybe know what was written in the script and maybe even heard someone voice the lines. So you already are primed to understand what is being said there. In the same way as if I was to play the music video to your favourite song on a TV with no volume, you could in your brain hear the lyrics as they mouth them. But if I asked someone who's never heard the song before, tell me what the lyrics are, they'd have no fucking chance. Maybe the odd word they could get right. It's actually why the whole lip reading thing, where they go, we brought in an expert lip reader. I've seen them do 3 different lip readers who give a different interpretation and all sounded plausible. And as you hear their interpretation of them saying what it is, your brain will make it fit to the lip movements and be, oh, that's what he said. So those ones in football, be careful on that one. That's one of those things that they use, a bit like handwriting experts in court and forensics things, that let's just say, another psyop of films, aren't actually as certain as you think they are. Even DNA sequencing, sometimes it can be like, we found his DNA, that can actually just be the DNA of your family if you don't know. Think of a very high profile case where someone supposedly killed someone, but then they went, I didn't do it, and they got off, and maybe, little breadcrumb for you here, maybe someone in their family could have done it, and therefore their DNA was at the scene. Anyway, look it up. Year of the Knife, I think was the term. Look it up. So I'm going to put that in 80, because the problem I have is the middle part of this film really lulls, because remember what I've told you and established before with the Batman films? The middle part of the film is the psyop / the fucking philosophical, what would you call it? Theory crafting or something, or manifestation in like a Dostoevsky type of way, right? The middle part is about ideas of, think about this, guys. Martial law. What if the world was threatened by nuclear bombs and terrorists? Think of the era when this film came out. I'll even throw this out there. You could even interpret into it. There's almost sort of a lockdown nature. There's an idea of like, what if the police had to be the hero? By the way, people who are in certain alphabet agencies and law enforcement will fucking love Christopher Nolan. He must be their favourite director, mate. I'm telling you, it's obvious. Think about it. From Insomnia to fucking Dark Knight to Dark Knight Rises, bro, they must love this guy. He's justifying everything they do and want to do. And they're always just morally superior. They're always just right when they do the thing that would be a violation of your rights and potentially morals. It's funny how that works, isn't it? But I suspend my disbelief like everyone, and I enjoy the film too, don't I? I even think the end of Dark Knight is very heroic. You might think that's what I sort of did with my Reckless video recently, or where I'm willing to be hated for my opinions about the Imperial Valkyries team. Now, here's the thing. I don't believe, though, in the part at the end of that film of like, you let someone frame you for something, spoiler, that you may or may not have done, and you allow people to think. I think that's dishonest. I don't believe in lying. I don't believe in white lies. I don't believe there's such a thing as white lies that do good. I think all lies harm on some level, and I prefer a black truth to a white lie. But I also did learn you don't always have to say the truth. As in, certain times, to just not speak is of value. You don't have to say things to everyone that you believe. So, Dark Knight Rises lulls a little bit in the middle. And then the problem is, it looked like it was going to have an unbelievable final act. But I have to say, spoiler, let's just say he has a big fight with someone that you think's going the way you expect, and then I actually thought he kind of subverted your expectations in a way that actually was very unsatisfying. And I think actually the denouement of that film, while the Alfred plot is very heart-rendering, holy shit is the sort of like, essentially what Batman does at the end to save the day if he saves the day, and it is kind of like a comic book, I'll give him that. He's gotten back more into the comic book realm than he did in the first film, but it's kind of silly. It is kind of silly, I've got to say. And also, the whole ending with, let's say, someone who becomes his protege is so hastily done, and I actually do just straight up think, when they're like, of course, you could go by this name. That's almost going at Christopher Nolan like a boo, fucking Rotten Tomato at the script. What are you doing? Why are you putting that in there? Oh, boo. Like, put it this way. I'll make a really extreme hyperbolic example because obviously it's way better than this. It's like the Christopher Nolan equivalent of that fucking whack-ass scene in Rings of Power where that woman just goes, thank you, Grand Elf. And he's like, Grand Elf? And you're like, oh, fuck everything about this. Why are you wearing my favourite characters as a fucking skin mask, you demon? What do you want of me? So anyway, that's just a small complaint about Dark Knight. It is a good film. Like, if I'm giving it an 8 to Dark Knight Rises, Dark Knight, then the Dark Knight Rises probably gets a 7.5. Remember, on my scale, 7.5 is a very good score. It's bordering on excellent. Then I'm going to go to Interstellar. Now, Interstellar is one of the only films of Christopher Nolan, along with Oppenheimer, that I have never seen more than once. And the reason why, and this makes it tricky to rank because I could end up overrating it, I'll probably go watch it again soon actually, is I found it so incredibly intense a film. Once it gets past the first, I don't know, half an hour, this one just never lets you go. And the ending, even though parts of it are a little bit like, you're going out of your way to sort of torture me with some of the like sentimentality, it did hit really hard. It does hit really hard. Like a lot of the like main characters, like let's say plights and ups and downs and emotional moments, they are really brutal in this one. I did have a good joke where when I did see this film, I did say to someone, that's why you don't put women on interstellar missions to save the human race. And by the way, you know what I said about Kubrick? I think, by the way, Christopher Nolan's new role in society is to be the new Kubrick and pioneer the new psyops. Think about the work a film like this has done for a certain sort of like real world Iron Man type character who's going to save us all. When the people need a hero, we will provide one. Funny how that works. But it is a fucking excellent film. Like, I've got to say, I'm tempted to put it into S tier. I'm going to put it A tier for the moment and think about the other films. And I might go, I don't know on that one. The problem is I haven't seen it again. I did think it was really good. Like, here's what's funny. People who get caught up in the whole, like, spoiler, Tesseract sequences, that's not how it would work. First of all, bro, you do realize 90% of those astrophysics themselves are just a bunch of, like, they're almost just comic book writing. Like, you might think because of some advanced math and people moving a decimal point and putting, I've just added a constant. You might think because of all that shit that like it's real and hard science. No. It may as well be a comic book. So I'm actually totally fine with that as like a fictional. Maybe I'll put it S for now actually. And I think the soundtrack is one of the best ever. It's unbelievable, the soundtrack to this film. Performances, Matthew McConaughey is very good. By the way, another example of casting people well. Anne Hathaway's very well cast in this film. Even though I totally disagree with the notion that, like, spoiler, Batman's character would ever get with someone like that in the end. She didn't have the, here's the thing. I would not advise you marry or have a long-term partner who shares diametrically opposed moral values to you and isn't willing to cede to yours. I think that will not work if you're a man. She does a decent job of her performance in Interstellar. I think I'm just put off because I hate her character so much. I really despise her character in this film. I think her character and what her end sort of conclusions are about what it's fine to do, she is an absolute monster. It's crazy. And I don't particularly even care for that whole thing of spoiler. The fact that she might like meet up with him again at the end, it's like, that part's a bit like, whatever, mate. But it's such a long film and he did so much with the rest of it. Here's the reason why I can forgive so much about the last third of Interstellar, or the last quarter. Is because it's one of those films where your emotion has gone to such a fever pitch and the plot has gotten so crazy and the walls are closing in and there's no time and there's no way out and you've got to try everything and you've got to triage things and that somehow you yourself, almost like you're reading a great Superman comic, know that in real life maybe you couldn't get out of that situation. But in fiction, the beauty of fiction and a Superman comic is Superman does always save the day. He just keeps trying something until something works. And so almost the relief of actually breaking through at the end, when you're being paralyzed by the closing walls of the chrysalis, to actually break out and become the butterfly, there's something euphoric about that. There's something transcendent about that aspect that, again, does appeal to art. So I think that part is, I think it's a very satisfying film. Even though, by the way, it's full of tragedy. It's actually, in that sense, somewhat of a metaphor for life, isn't it? So after that, we're going to have Dunkirk and then Tenet and Oppenheimer. So Dunkirk, funnily enough, similar themes in that sense to Interstellar. Right. Dunkirk, for me, here's the problem I have. I'm going to initially put it, but I'll probably put some of these movies down. I'm going to put it as a B initially, and the reason why goes like this. Tom Hardy does another good job. I think Kenneth Branagh does a good job. I didn't particularly care for the guy from that fucking, I don't even know if it is One Direction, that British pop group. It's not bad, but I didn't really care for him that much. I think the way it shows war, think about this if you like psyops and conspiracies. Why would someone in, was it 2014 or something like that? 2020 want to make a World War II film and bring back that old set of topics and about like young men and the importance of like heroism in the face of, just interesting if you imagine there might be any big land wars in the future. So I do think what it captures in this film is, first of all, if you are British or English, I think it will absolutely enrapture you. You will feel like your ancestors are calling to you from the Battle of Britain. I mean, even though it was after this, and what happened with the boats, etc. The scene with the boats, by the way, is just, I mean, it's fucking unbelievable, because you probably heard that story if you're British, but you never really thought about what it meant. The idea that they just get in their little fishing boats and fucking go over there. That is crazy. And he does an amazing job, spoiler, of making you feel like you are those troops on that beach, encapsulated by the Germans, just being picked apart, waiting for potentially, let's just say, a ride that will never come. And then also, similarly, spoiler, Tom Hardy's character, what he goes through is fabulous. I think that's an incredibly well done, heroic component to that aspect of the film that also has tragedy. By the way, another film marred by tragedy, but not marred in the sense that it's made worse. It's just that it's inextricably tied to its tragedy as much as it's tied to its heroism. You even see them at times as things that are intertwined, because as they said in Game of Thrones season 1, like something like, "Father, how can I be brave if I'm scared?" It's like, because that's like, that is what it means to be brave, basically. To have courage is to actually act brave in the face of being afraid, isn't it? So, and the length of it works because of the nature of the film. But I think I'm going to put it B for the moment, because I don't think it was as good as these films. And I think these films are just in another class. But again, we'll come back at the end and maybe I'll bump a couple down. Tenet is going to make you all rage immediately when you hear my opinion on it. Because, as I said, I got the lifetime pass to Disneyland, which I would never go to in real life, by the way, because actually I do know about the conspiracy world. But I've got the lifetime pass to Disney World, so I can always go on the rides anytime I feel like it. And if a new ride opens up in this analogy, I'll go on it and give it a go because it's Disneyland in it. Tenet's like that for me. I'm already in when Christopher Nolan makes a film. And I actually thought, first of all, this is a visually arresting film. It's fabulous. What you're seeing on the screen is, you've never seen, it's like some of the shots in Inception. You've never seen anything like this in cinema. Now look, does it make sense? Stop asking if things make real life sense. They're not supposed to. The whole point of a film is not to be realistic. Do you know why the sound mix is shit in films and the lighting is shit in films? Because they're trying to make it realistic. What you're learning is golden era of Hollywood where they backlit everything and put all light shining in your face. Makes the film better because you can see the performance. When people walk into a room, I want to hear what they're saying, even though it's unrealistic that I am a camera over here and they're over there and I can hear them as if I'm next to them. Don't actually put me over there and I have to fucking, what's he saying? Fuck, I can't make out his lips. Like, the fact it's not real is what makes this movie work. Think of it as like, if this was a fucking anime, if he did every single shot as an anime, you would all fucking cream yourselves over this film and call it one of the best ever. If Satoshi Kon had directed this film shot for shot, you'd call it the greatest anime film ever. You'd go, it's better than Akira and Ghost in the Shell. But because it's a real world film, your brain starts going, actually, and then you just fucking start ruining the film for yourself and going, how would that work going back in time? Like, bro, you're thinking about it too much. Let it go and just go for the ride. Because the ride is fucking sick. First of all, the first time you watch it, it takes you, at best, maybe 2/3 of the way in, you start to really get a sense of what might happen towards it. But even then, I don't think you will. It's also a film that, you know, famously, Fight Club should have been a great movie to watch the second time. Spoiler, it isn't. I won't tell you why because you haven't seen that film. But when you watch it the second time, it's a good film and you go, oh, cool, I can see what he was doing there. But it isn't a better film the second time. It's a great film the first time. This film gets better every time you watch it. The second time you watch it, because you're not going to have the pressure of the plot and you're already going to know what happens, you're going to actually be able to enjoy certain sequences and certain parts of the plot will make more sense to you. And then you'll be able to comprehend the hardest part of this film. The hardest part. By the way, I'll just quickly explain something I didn't go through. I've just realized earlier again. Remember how the film contains the structure of the plot itself? Well, if you think about it, in The Dark Knight, that's about the idea that it's essentially the idea, isn't it? He hasn't given absolutely everything. And this film is everything Christopher Nolan's giving to the end of the Batman universe. And it's finishing all the plots while also leaving the door open in the universe for the things that you're never going to explore and leaving it at a resting point. And that's Batman when he begins. This is Batman like rising to prominence. And this is the end of Batman. This is the last act, isn't it? And also, in some ways, he has to have even some moral compromises in this film. And he has to become a kind of like, not monstrous, but he has to be willing to even give up, I wouldn't even say his humanity, but essentially he has to actually be willing to risk his whole life at all moments to potentially win. Inception obviously has the plot elements of a dream and what is reality to a dream and would we know the difference between reality and a dream? They've got all that. Interstellar is about the idea of like, can space and time be transcended by like emotion? Do our minds shape reality? And in some sense, do our minds and the imagination and the spirit and the psychic realm, if you want to take that aspect, do they have an aspect which they are intemporal? They actually aren't trapped within inside time. They can go out of it and potentially like send ripples back or project forwards, etc. Certain ideas there. So for Tenet, I'm going to make everyone really mad here. Because here's the problem. Yeah, this is why I'm going to have to probably fix some of these. Because I think it probably should be B, but part of me wants to put it in A. Because essentially, the problem is if you've never seen Tenet, I hope you haven't listened to any of this and you go watch it. Because essentially, if you understand the central plot isn't the following, guys. A guy is going through a bunch of missions, and then in doing so, he's weirdly meeting these people who appear to be going backwards. And then later on, he goes backwards and then, spoiler, re-experiences parts of the rest of the film as someone going backwards. And by the way, I actually think, let's just say, one of his costume changes when he goes backwards, and the way that scene is then reinterpreted is actually fucking genius that he put that on film. I think it's fucking unbelievable. Also, I think Kenneth Branagh is fucking goated in this film. It's probably the best Robert Pattinson film. I'm not even a massive fan of that guy. I think he's quite overrated. I think he's fucking excellent in how he's cast in this film. Here's the thing about this film, is if you actually understand the idea of a temporal pincer movement. And here's the problem, you don't. And the reason I say that is I didn't the first time I watched it. Even the second time, I went and I read up a bunch of people trying to explain the plot, trying to think like, let me grasp this thing. Because really, the hardest part of the last sort of third of this film is the whole thing where you have the two teams, don't you? And when they're having that battle. That is actually the first model that you can then use for the whole film. Essentially, Robert Pattinson's character is the key to the film. You have to understand this. His whole character and life, the whole film was a temporal pincer movement. That's the part you're not getting. It wasn't just like a linear film where the protagonist goes, then he goes backwards in time to try and save this person from this person, but then already in the past something happened. No, essentially the genius of it is you have these rival factions, and obviously Kenneth Branagh's character is on helping one faction. They really are. You're just not meeting some of them because they're elsewhere in time. You really are. It is the past. It is like the present and the future battling each other and using temporal aspects to do so. By the way, there's a very famous, I mean, it's very famous, but although you just won't know about it because media will have told you you're a moron if you even entertain an idea. Let's just say there's a very famous real world conspiracy nowadays that's about the idea, this is what people don't understand, of maybe people who are in like big, I mean, I think geopolitics is wrestling, so understand that it's fake to me. But in the storyline of geopolitics, let's say the notion is that certain factions have accesses to devices that let them see either into the past or into the future. But you see glimpses, a bit like that Palantir. Wonder why someone would call a tech company that. A Palantir from Lord of the Rings, where you can get visions through it, can't you? And see things which have not yet been and which have been, and all that shit. Let's just say the idea that people have those, but because you're only getting a vision, you can intuit or try and like reverse engineer from that, but you don't see everything and all of the shit. You can't go, hey, what are you doing there? Like, it doesn't work that way. That aspect, if you understand that aspect, each time you watch this film, it gets more brilliant. The problem is this. As a film for people to go to the cinema and go, I loved Inception and The Dark Knight, I'd like to see a box office movie. What the hell was that? It's almost not possible to understand the film the first time or really appreciate it. You can just enjoy the visual feast. You can just enjoy how crazy some of the plot points are. You can enjoy, I hope even the first time, you do get that. I think what happens with certain characters' death in this film is beautiful. I think that is actually fucking, and each time you watch it, that will get more and more. It will tug at your heartstrings. It's really special. But you have to watch it a few times and understand the temporal pincer movement concept to really get why it's brilliant. I actually think this is a film that will age better and better with every decade. I think one day, you're about to experience right now why you can't know if a film is a stone cold classic the first few years after it comes out. You know how everyone now goes, of course the bloody idiot critics and all this audience didn't get Blade Runner. Mate, you probably wouldn't have at the time. You didn't have the palate to. You had to have Blade Runner. And then also, by the way, many films after Blade Runner that it informed that then made it so that when you saw Blade Runner in the early 90s or in the 2000s, you were watching the film with sort of almost the Cliff's Notes. You'd seen other things crib from it and do certain aspects and resonances. And so as a result, you could stomach it. They couldn't back then. They couldn't not understand what they were seeing. So in that sense, I think Tenet, every 10 years that goes by, it will become a cult classic and people will look back and think the people of this time period were stupid for going, it doesn't make sense, it's trash, and it was just a bunch of wankery where you just lost the plot completely. And even the whole thing of like, look, I will say this film might have the worst sound mix of them all, but you can just watch it a bunch of times yourself. That gets past it somewhat. I think the first half is super compelling. The second half borders on genius. I don't quite know with how it ends aside from the character's death. I didn't say which. How I feel totally about the ending. But I think it's an excellent film. I think it's mad underrated. I'll put it there for now and I'll think about this. Because I do probably want to fill this out and make it a proper S to D and use the whole thing here. Right, Oppenheimer. If you're someone who was like, I love Inception, I loved Interstellar, I loved the Dark Knight movies, Christopher Nolan is my favourite, he is the best. I guess Dunkirk was all right. Tenet wasn't that good though. Then Oppenheimer's the film for you. This is a very, very simple film to watch. Essentially, you could again say, like I do with my lens on the other films, in a way, isn't the movie about someone being driven to the ultimate lengths, thinking that they have to do something, asking, is it justified, never really coming to a true conclusion on that, understanding that even if you do what you think was the right thing and was the moral thing, you might still have to carry the burden and the consequence of what you did, even if that was the right thing. That's actually a key thing people don't understand about being a hero and having courage. If you take a man's life, even if it is justified and was necessary, it doesn't mean you get to go, well, I didn't take a man's life. I no longer have any feelings of guilt about snuffing out a man's life, whether they're a monster or not. Also, you could even make the point, some aspects of the film, he doesn't just blow up a bomb, does he? He sort of blows up his life. You could even say he blows up the military system in the US. I'd even say this. I do think the craziest part of this film, the craziest part, this is what really shows me that I have grown up my entire life in the Anglosphere within an automatically left-wing coded world where the teachers were sometimes literal, now they just manifest it publicly, they were always just crypto commies the whole fucking time. Because bro, the morality of this film is I'm supposed to seemingly take him like a traditional protagonist and ride with him and go and think that people who are against him are wrong or they're persecuting him or the way they investigate him. It's kind of McCarthyism, isn't it? By the way, when you find out some of the things McCarthyism did find out, some of it was sort of justified, mate. They were trying to subvert society, the government, everything. They were, if you don't know, openly trying to align. Remember, the concept of like international communism is the idea it wasn't just revolutions in one country. You wanted to then fund and stimulate and connect with communist revolutions around the whole world, which you hoped to spark, so the whole world became a communist revolution. And that's literally the nightmare idea of what they were. It wasn't just about Russia, guys, or China. So as a result, the craziest part of this film, that look, when I'm watching it, I suspend disbelief and go along with it. But then I come out and go, what the fuck is... Bro, he actually is a traitor to his country. Does no one else get this? Like, him and a bunch of those other people absolutely probably should be investigated by the government and probably shouldn't even have been given certain security clearances allowed to do certain things. Like, it's presented as, oh, they're fucking being real hard ass on him now. No, look what he's doing. Look at the people he's associating with and look at how he himself, with his human foibles, is allowed by sex and hubris, and even, by the way, the arrogant hubris that you could decide for all of the world what's right and wrong and who should have certain godlike powers, etc. Even that itself is like kind of portrayed as though, yes, he's tortured by it, but you all think, yeah, he's right though, isn't he? In the end, no, that's actually fucking crazy. Who the fuck was he? Who the fuck was he? So the problem with Oppenheimer is this. It's a very well-made film. It's fantastically shot. The music is great. Great acting performances. Cillian Murphy's just a very good actor, isn't he? He basically carries Peaky Blinders, doesn't he? Even through the ropey parts. Matt Damon is excellent in this film. Some of the other performances, I'm not as big on. I actually thought like Emily Blunt was pretty misused, even though she's good. I normally prefer to be a character with some humour or a bit of sort of charisma. The actual topic, for me, didn't get interesting enough that it could have been an S-tier movie either. Think about these films. This is about the nature of magic and perception. This is about reality and dreams. This is about family, what it means to transcend time and space via love and the human imagination. These ones are more limited, and then these are just good oddities. Right, am I going to sort this out? Because I don't in theory just want it to be like this. Like if I have to move some films down, what goes down? Like, here's the thing. This has a canny plot, but I guess it doesn't have, like, all-time performances. I thought Insomnia, because it wasn't original material, wasn't quite as good. I might even put Dunkirk down. I also did think Robert Downey Jr., and especially, think about why this might be. The way certain scenes are just in black and white, I think if you can put a mental model as to why that would be and why they're in colour otherwise, I think that actually is a very effective technique too. What else goes to B tier here? Like I told you, the more I watch Tenet, the more affection I have for it as a film. Then again, the emotional resonance of this film probably puts it in a B tier. But does Oppenheimer stay here or does it go to here? It is an excellent film is the problem. The only problem is this though. I do think if I rewatch it, it might go to B tier. But when I watched it, it was an A tier film. I think that's actually going to be it. Oh, and also, like the bomb, by the way, I won't get into why, but don't worry about nukes. Just don't worry about it, boys. I mean, I'll just give you the stupid geopolitical version. They were only ever used once, except for tests. It was like fucking 8 years ago now. Apparently, according to that, everyone's a maniac and they've got bombs, they're going to use it. They never seem to, though, do they? Weird how that works, isn't it? It's almost like you're presenting a version of reality that isn't the case. And even scaremongering. What's that? You've made a clock that you keep telling me when it hits 12, the whole world ends. Bro, that's even in Watchmen. Like, that's fucking whack, bro. But okay, I get that people love that psyop. I think it can stay there. It can stay there. Oh, like a nuclear bomb. In somewhere, if you think about where the bomb is within the film, it's the build-up to the bomb. Then the bomb has almost a ripple effect. It's almost like the bomb was calling to him from the beginning of the film, and then the bomb is rippling through history and his life after the film as well, isn't it? In the same ways, in the psyop of what the nuclear bomb is, it causes like nuclear destruction, which will last centuries, bro, and oh my God, the impact that we have done to their lives and all that. Exactly, you get what I mean. So I think this is my list. I wonder if I'll change the order, though, because I did these obviously in like the order the film came out. Like, which ones are better out of these? Memento. That's probably a better film than Memento. Maybe I'll put Tenet as the worst of the A films. Dark Knight Rises. Yeah, Memento's better than that. The first 2/3 of this are the best of all the films here. I think there's actually the order up here. I think I can do the order down there. Yeah, that's going to be it. Obviously, if you haven't seen any of these films, I would suggest you watch every single one. Try to go in without knowing anything about them. If you have already watched Tenet, but you only watched it once, I would suggest you rewatch it with an open mind. And I would suggest you think about the end of Inception. I would definitely go and watch Following if you've never watched it. And if you buy some Gamer Subs to support me and get 10% off with the code Thorin at gamersubs.gg, then shout out to you. Enjoy the Gamer Subs. I like flavours like lemonade, guacamole, Game Fighter 9000, it's strawberry and lime. And what cherry limesicle and Sakura Splash, which is sour cherry. This video and the others on my channel were supported by the people on my side channel Patreon. Do you want to choose a topic I focus on next? Maybe ask a question in my regular video AMA? Do you want teasers? Find out who the upcoming guests are for Thor Inquiry interviews? Do you want to take part in a never to be released, exclusively recorded 1 hour discussion between me and you, which actually you can also use for consulting or some sort of coaching if you'd like? Well, if so, heed this call to action and join Thor Inside today, where in the description box there's a Patreon link.